Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Phillies Talk Podcast for February 26, 2023. A great day here on the show. I'm joined with my longtime co-host, Matt Veazey, here on the show. Matt, we got spring training baseball all of a sudden.
Hey, Rich, how are you?
All right, how you doing?
Wonderful.
That's great. So we were just tuning into the television before we started the podcast here, and 80 some degrees down there in Clearwater. The palm trees are swaying and the Phillies are on the field. Is that a miracle or what?
I wouldn't say it's a miracle, Rich, but it is a blessing. Let's put it that way. Nice to have baseball back, and we can actually start talking about ball players and performances and game results. Phillies won. Well, actually, they split yesterday. They won their official spring Grapefruit League opener 7-4 over the Yankees, pulling away in the late innings. And the split squad team dropped a 4-2 decision to Detroit out in Lakeland. So a mixed bag, but it was good to have the players out on the field again.
Yeah, shaking that rust off, so to speak, yesterday, and probably for a good week or more, maybe 2 weeks with some of these players. But as you said, yeah, the Phillies' main team that they broadcast yesterday was against the Yankees. They had the win, and always better to win than lose, but we'll take it with a grain of salt for now. I can't wait to see the full team later on in the month of March here as we get closer to opening day and more into the spring training, the meat of it, so to speak, with the regulars on the Phillies team. But we got that World Baseball Classic sitting in the middle of that as well.
Yeah, the Phillies have, I believe it is 8 players headed to the WBC, and they'll be leaving camp, I believe, by next weekend or right after that, sometime between March 5th and March 8th. Those 8 players, Trey Turner, JT Realmuto, Kyle Schwarber will be headed to Pool C, which is over in Arizona. So they have to travel out there to the desert. They'll be playing for Team USA, of course. Taijuan Walker also goes to Arizona. He'll be playing for Team Mexico. Mm-hmm. And down in Miami, the Team Venezuela will be getting Ranger Suarez and Jose Alvarado, a couple of quality lefties from the Phils. The Dominican Republic is slated to get Giovanni Soto from the Phillies, new reliever acquired in that big trade that sent Matt Vierling and Nick Maton over to Detroit. But Soto hasn't reported to camp, I don't believe, yet. He's had some supposedly minor issues, so he is scheduled to pitch for the Dominican Republic. And then Garrett Stubbs, our backup catcher, is headed to Team Israel. So at least for a few days, sometime around March 5th to 8th, probably lasting through maybe like the 11th or 12th, the Phillies will be without both JT Realmuto and Garrett Stubbs. So their top 2 catchers will be gone. Stubbs probably won't be gone too long. Team Israel, not expected, not much expected out of them. Probably they'll get 2 or 3 games in, and Stubbs will be back. And unless there's a major upset, Realmuto will probably be there maybe another 5 to 7 days longer, if Team USA goes all the way to the finals.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can't wait to see some of those games. Kind of sad that the Phillies will lose some of their best players out of camp. A lot of people go down to spring training. Maybe they didn't realize that some of their favorite players won't be there. But, today they showed spring training down there in Clearwater with the weather and everything like that. And as long as you have baseball playing, I don't think too many people will mind.
No, and it's especially when you talk about those catchers, it's an opportunity for some guys. Rafael Marchand, who's basically had a cup of coffee up here with the Phillies. He'll get a lot of opportunity to catch. He'll probably be the primary guy. And then you have some of the guys down there, they're carrying because of that situation. I think something along the lines of 6 non-roster invitees as catchers. So, or at least 5, and then maybe another player or two who have some catching experience or emergency catching experience. So it's an opportunity for guys for the coaches to work with them. They'll get that exposure to some big league pitching that they might not have previously. So it's an opportunity for guys for a week or two to get some experience down there in Clearwater.
Yes, indeed. And as we're doing the podcast, of course, the Phillies are playing, and Trey Turner just got his first hit on his first at bat as a Philly, banged out a single. That's awesome to hear, and I think he's going to be a great addition to this Phillies baseball team this year.
First of many hits, Rich. He's got a long contract, so Phillies fans better get used to him here as their starting shortstop for a number of years. And then even beyond that, I mean, I'm not sure how long he'll be able to play shortstop at a quality level. He's 29 now. He'll turn 30 during the season, I believe, during the summer months. And so the Phillies will have him for his year 29, 30, 31, 32, 33. So, he should provide them with quality shortstop play for at least the next 4 or 5 years, you would assume. And, beyond that, the second half of his contract, they can see what's going on at that time. He could end up switching over to second base at some point. That wouldn't surprise me. Just all depends on who else is available, how he's performing. But the man's in great shape. He's an outstanding athlete. He's an outstanding ball player. So it wouldn't surprise me to see him be productive even into his late 30s. I'm looking forward to him. He's very, very dynamic, exciting player, Rich.
Yes, he is. Matt Gelb just tweeting out as we're doing the live stream here, Trey Turner wearing double oven mitts on the bases. And he heard Matt did that this is something he's going to do to avoid finger and hand injuries this year. So look forward to the double oven mitts on Trey Turner, possibly when he reaches base this year. But as you said, I'm excited for it too, for him being on the team. I'm looking for a player to buy a jersey for this year. And I had my eye on one, and now I'm starting to think maybe Turner for one of the authentic jerseys. So I'm going to make my mind up in the next couple of weeks, but he's definitely one of the players I would consider buying a very expensive authentic jersey for.
Especially, and you made the key observation there, Rich, expensive. So if you're going to lay out that money for a jersey these days, unless you had a real absolutely favorite player, who has a short-term deal, I think you have to make that type of investment for a player that the team has invested in long-term. And certainly Trey Turner is going to be around for the next decade. And you have somebody like Bryce Harper, of course, who's always around. You can, feel safe, obviously, purchasing his jersey and that he'll be around for a long time. And even guys like Kyle Schwarber and Nick Castellanos, Brandon Marsh, these players, even the younger guys, Alec Bohm, Bryson Stott, it's really just a question of, pick your poison on who do you like. There are a number of starting pitchers. You could go with Zach Wheeler, who's going to be here for at least the next 2-3 years. And hopefully at some point they'll get Nola signed. And if you see that happen, then he's going to be here for maybe 6, 7, 8 years. So Ranger Suarez is going to be around a long time. But there's a lot of places, and you might even want to roll your dice. You might want to go out there and get a Painter jersey or an Abel jersey. So I would wait more and see those guys break in and actually stay healthy, maybe another year or two before you bought their jersey. But the Phillies have a number of guys. Their core is locked up to play together for the next 3-4 years. So a lot of a lot of people you can invest in and feel comfortable that you're going to get quality usage out of a jersey on a productive player, a likable player who's going to be here for a number of years.
Yeah, I had considered Castellanos as well. I think he's an exciting player, although, I'm looking for long term too. If he should, just be a couple years and out for the Phillies. I hope he has a good year this year, by the way. But he was in the running as well for the jersey. I'm really rooting for him, and hoping he does well this year. But yeah, as you said, Painter's a possibility. Wheeler's always a possibility. So we'll see as time goes on how I narrow down the choice for that jersey. But they're expensive.
Yes, they are. If you have the means, then it's just a question of picking the guy that you like and investing your money and your hard-earned dollars in them. You can always go. There's always, if you don't have that kind of money, or you don't want to take the risk, you can always go the jersey route. Buy that T-shirt. That has they're great, especially in the summertime when it's hot out and you want to go to the ball game. Throw on a jersey of your favorite player.
Exactly. Good tip there. You don't have to always splash out on the big. As you said, it's probably more comfortable in a cotton, nice T-shirt anyway. But somebody that doesn't have to worry about money too much is Manny Machado. And I guess you probably read the news by now that he possibly is in agreement with a new contract with the Padres, $350 million, taking him into, I believe, 41 years old, 11-year extension from the Padres.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising to me, Rich, because I really didn't think they were going to be able to get that done. Not because they were unwilling to put the money out. Obviously they were, and they did get it done. But I just thought that Machado was going to use this as an opportunity to open up his contract again and go shopping in the market, see what was out there. Now, San Diego obviously was a place that he was comfortable with. They've made an investment in winning. They've brought in more good players this year. So looks like San Diego is going to be a tough team for a while to come. And they'll have Juan Soto now that they're going to have to deal with contract-wise soon. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him.
Yeah, after years of somewhat obscurity, San Diego has suddenly tried to play the big stage with the Yankees, the Phillies, the Mets, of course, with their spending, and really came out of nowhere. I don't know what happened there in San Diego. Maybe we'll have to find a blogger out there to bring on the show and tell us what transpired out there in San Diego for them to bring all these big names onto that team. Seemingly years you really didn't hear much from San Diego. They've been one of those teams like a team under the radar, so to speak, and not one that splash out on a lot of free agents, high-priced free agents at that. But they certainly have made the investment, and we'll have to see how they do this year. Wondering, have you seen the PECOTA ratings for the Phillies for 2023? They're picked to be third place in the NL East by a couple of those rating services. I'm wondering if you had a chance to read that yet.
Rich, I have, and it's a fair rating. They finished in third place last year. The Mets and Braves are both good. Bryce Harper's going to miss, at least he's anticipated to miss half of the season. So it's understandable why they're ranked third as they are. The Phillies can certainly change that narrative themselves by the way that they play. And if we all remember, they played really well last year when Bryce was out. It was actually that run that got them back into playoff contention pretty much happened right when Bryce went out. And when he returned, they obviously they're a better team when Bryce is in the lineup, but they had already got themselves vaulted back into postseason contention, actually into a spot at that point. So, it's one thing to say we're not going to miss Bryce. That's going to be, the loss of Bryce is going to be mitigated to an extent by, I think, three key improvements. One is the addition of Trey Turner, who is another MVP caliber player. So he alone is going to help mitigate the loss of Harper. But then again, also, I think Taijuan Walker is a better pitcher than Kyle Gibson was in the rotation. Ranger Suarez, I believe, is going to benefit more from the full season that he had in the rotation last year and his postseason experience, the growth that he showed last year. And then the bullpen, I believe, is improved over where it was a year ago at this time. So while I understand Pacoda I think what they're doing is they're being conservative with the Phillies. The Phillies themselves can change the narrative as the season moves along.
Yes, they can. They can reinvent the wheel, so to speak, and prove all the pundits wrong. I'm going to put up a still photo that was just shared by Corey Seidel on Twitter. And it shows the defensive lineup here with Castellanos up at Baycare Ballpark there this afternoon. In this game, it shows you how the different fielders are lining up. Here they're practically giving Castellanos all of this area in here between first base and second base to get a hit. That's wild, isn't it?
You're going to, for all of the talk, Rich, of the big changes in shifts and shift restrictions this year, you're still going to see shifts. There's just going to be restrictions. And what you're going to see on a guy like Castellanos, as you see right here, and as you just demonstrated, you're going to see that second baseman on right-handed dead pull hitters playing basically right on the bag. The shortstop filling the hole. And you'll see the same on a guy like Schwarber on the opposite side. You'll see the first baseman as close to the bag as he can get. The second baseman will be totally in the hole, back on the dirt as far as he can go. And the shortstop will be as close to the second base bag as he'll be allowed to go. So it's still going to be closed off. You just aren't going to see those radical shifts where they put three players completely on the other side of the bag. So for a guy like Schwarber, you would have seen three infielders on the right side of the infield. On a Castellanos, you would have seen three on the left side. It's going to be as close as they can get to that now. It's just that swing player, the shortstop for lefty hitters, the second baseman for righty hitters, is going to be at the bag instead of 5 feet on the other side of the bag. It's going to call for maybe a little bit more quickness and range, but most middle infielders today have that kind of quickness and range where they can cover it. And the other thing that I'm going to be interested really in seeing on shifts, Rich, is I think that there are going to be, I don't know that everybody will do it, and it may be a question of, I believe that there's always some bold team out there who does it more than others, but there are going to be some teams who go two outfielders against certain hitters. They're going to run that risk. They're going to put they're going to swing two outfielders over into right field on a Kyle Schwarber, for instance, and play another outfielder in shallow right field, and just give up left field. Maybe not 100%, maybe, a little bit of a swing around, but they're going to leave a large chunk of left field open to a guy like Kyle Schwarber. And then they'll take the risk that, a couple of times a year, he'll catch one off the end of the bat and bloop one out, because what's going to happen is their pitchers are going to also be busting him in for the most part, trying to make sure that he hits it to the right side. So Major League Baseball teams aren't stupid, and they're going to do whatever they can within the rules to gain some kind of edge for themselves defensively. So fans, while the shift is going to have some measure of effect, I don't believe it's going to be as radical as some people might have thought it's going to be, because I think teams are going to find a way to adjust. I think the athletes are better. Teams are going to begin to start on as far as their infielders are concerned. I think they're going to be there's going to be more emphasis, especially at second base and shortstop, on range, athleticism, arms, that defensive fielding ability as we move forward in the game with the shift restrictions. So fans should expect to see once in a while on a Nick Castellanos to the left side, on a Kyle Schwarber to the right side, that there's a third outfielder who is there where as kind of like maybe in softball, you might term it as a short fielder. And then two of the other outfielders that are left swinging around towards that side, and they're just going to leave the better part of the opposite field, if you will, for Schwarber to left field, right field for Castellanos. They're going to leave that uncovered, figuring, hey, even if he bloops one over there, our outfielder's fast enough that he can get to it. Maybe they're going to get a triple, but they're not fast enough, these runners, to get an inside the park homer. So I think you'll see it played off based on who is the hitter, what kind of command and control does our pitcher have, the ability to keep it on to bust them inside. So it's going to be interesting to me. I don't find it. There are some people who are wringing their necks about it. They're wringing their hands. They're worried about everything. Large bases. I watched the game yesterday, Rich. These large bases. Yeah, they're larger, but I made the comment yesterday on the Phillies Bell Twitter feed when it came up for a discussion that I didn't think there was that big of a difference. I think as far as the impact on the game itself goes, there'll be some difference because it's a little. I noticed on a couple of the players where they would overslide the bag on, say, a stolen base or an extra. They would take in the extra base and they would slide aggressively especially head first into the bag. They would slide over the bag before. It seems like there's more for them to grab onto now. So it looks like it might be easier for them to hang on. And there's more room for them to get into the base. But as far as the aesthetics of the game, when you're watching it and you're looking at the setup and all, you don't really notice it. I made the comment that somebody who didn't know that any of this had happened, if they had never advertised it, you might say to yourself, oh, something looks a little different about them bases. I can't figure out what it is this year. Or did they make them whiter? Like you just can't quite figure it out. Well, we all know they're a little bit bigger, but aesthetically, the game hasn't changed. And practically, as far as the impact on the actual sport, I think it's obviously going to have some, but I don't see this as a big deal, Rich. So, there's a lot of things here. I think the pitch clock is going to be the most interesting thing to me, but I don't think that it's going to have that big of an impact, only because a lot of the younger players who played in the minor leagues over the last 2 years, maybe 3 years, have already seen the pitch clock. They've already had to adjust their game to the pitch clock. And if they spent an amount of time there or a full season in the minors, they're fully adjusted to it already. These younger pitchers work quick already. Any of the veteran pitchers who really take their time, or any of the veteran hitters who habitually step out and take, 10, 15, 20 seconds, even adjusting wristbands and batting gloves and all kinds of twitches that they might have, they're going to have to adjust, those guys. And I think they will quickly, Rich. I think, that's why a good thing of instituting it immediately here in spring training for the first games. Any problems that there are, they're going to be able to iron out pretty early. These are professional, good quality athletes and hitters. They're going to get in the box. They're going to be ready to hit. And I noticed guys step out yesterday. They can still step out, adjust their batting gloves once, think about it for a few seconds, and get back into the box before they have to be facing the pitcher. There's plenty of time to do that. Yeah, there's just not that exorbitant extra time that some of these guys were taking. There are 2 Phillies that I'll be curious to watch about that I think would be affected. And one's already been mentioned by a number of national resources and pundits, and that is Bryce Harper. Bryce would step out a lot, adjust his batting glove straps, and think about it, bang the bat down a couple of times, and then get ready. He's going to have to be a little bit quicker, and he's going to have 3 months to be watching all of this. So I'm sure he's already going to be mentally prepared by the time he's ready to come back. And the other on the flip side on the mound is Aaron Nola. Nola's a guy who would frequently, step off, step back, wipe his brow, whatever, like get ready, but take a breath before the next pitch. You're going to have to get in there, get ready, and deliver your pitch. So these are talented guys, Rich, physically and baseball wise. So they're going to make the adjustments and let their talent take over. And in my opinion, it's going to be better for them. They're going to get in the box or get on the mound and just let their talent take over.
Yeah, and as you said, the pitching is going to have to think about time as well. We saw Andrew Bellotti start off today's game on Sunday as we're watching the game, and he was just getting the ball released as the 0 was coming up on the countdown. I think he missed it a couple times and it wasn't called, but he's been known to have a slow delivery to the plate. I think he's probably the slowest in the MLB is what I heard last year. So we saw a few pitches from him already today, and he was just about making it, so to speak. I think they could have called him for a couple of those violations already. So it's going to be interesting to see, the appeal process maybe on a pitch clock violation, or they call it a pitch timer.
I don't know if there is. Is there an appeal process? I don't know that there is. I don't think there is.
Is there, or is that the final word of the umpire? Because I could have swore I saw 0 on the clock before the ball was delivered today. It wasn't called. So that's going to be interesting. I wonder if they're going to keep stats on that, like X amount of pitches weren't called and they were stale pitches, the clock had expired, or, maybe the batter wasn't quite ready. That seems to be easier to call for them for some reason, but going forward, it's going to be interesting. One of the games was already decided by that pitch timers, what I heard the broadcast yesterday talk about for the Phillies. That's what the MLB wants you to call it, a pitch timer, not a clock. But one game was already decided by that. A strikeout was called, the batter wasn't ready, and the game was over. So time is definitely going to play a factor in baseball this year, unlike it never has over the past 100+ years that we've grown accustomed to it. It's never been a game controlled by time till now in the big leagues. But everything changes, and now this has changed.
You know what, Rich? The way I look at it is, it's kind of like things are different. We're raising children these days. But if you remember when we were growing up, when we were little kids, back in the old days, the little kid toddled up to the oven, and he went reaching up, or she went reaching up towards the oven. And what did mommy do? Smacked his hands. Right. Stay away. And you know what happens, Rich? When that happens to you once, maybe twice, you don't reach up to the oven again.
Right.
You know what I mean? So the player who cost his team the game yesterday because he wasn't ready to be in the batter's box. You know when that's going to happen again, Rich? It ain't going to happen again. Because if it happens again and you're not a star player, you're going to the minor leagues or you're getting released. So you can't be costing your team games. And to take the hands out of a batter, a good hitter, say, in a key situation, that can cost a game, whether it's happening in the ninth inning or the fourth inning or the sixth inning. Take an RBI opportunity away from a Manny Machado or a Bryce Harper or an Aaron Judge in a moment where the game, a lot of these games, Major League Baseball games, are decided by 1, 2, 3 runs. These are key moments in the game, even if they're in the fourth inning. So to me, it's a question of, if you let it happen to you once, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me,
Yeah.
These guys know the rule. They're big boys. Get in there and be ready to hit. And if you don't like it, you know what? You're getting paid hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to get in there and be ready and hit. And if you're not ready, you know what? Go dig a ditch somewhere, Rich. That's the way I'm being totally honest with you. be ready to play the game. These are the rules. You don't like it, go do something else.
And even ditch diggers will make a good buck these days. Seems like
Or
a lot of people.
I'm not trying to be little ditch diggers, but
Yeah,
if you don't want to play baseball, go do something else. If you don't like the rules, hey, there's other places to go. Other things to do.
There's other avenues to pursue, of course.
Be a podcaster.
Yeah,
start a website.
Big money.
Yeah.
We haven't seen it yet, but they say it's on the way.
All right.
But yeah, going to be interesting this season. Time is going to play a big tail in baseball. And interestingly enough, we talked about Manny Machado in the first couple minutes of the podcast, but he was the first one to be called for a violation, not being ready for a pitch. And he's been a little bit of that lazy, lollygaggy type of batter as well. So he's going to have to, earn his $350 million 11-year extension now and maybe speed up his game a little bit. So, the people can get out 20 minutes sooner than they used to. That's what they claim. This pitch timer is going to save about 20 minutes per game, possibly, bringing it down to about 2 hours and 25 minutes, 2 hours and a half, 2 hours, 40 minutes, somewhere around there, instead of the 3-hour games. But I don't know. I've never complained about the length of a game, and I don't think too many people have, but apparently somewhere they feel that it's going to improve the game.
Well, where you're going to see the improvement, Rich, and I noticed it just yesterday. I didn't only watch the Phillies; I watched a couple of games, and over the last couple of days, because there were a couple of games the day before on Friday, and the pace of the game is different. It's not just that the game's going to be over 20 minutes quicker in total, because you're going to have stops in the action because of television and radio revenue. So there are going to be TV and radio breaks here and there that are going to stop the action. People who get used to the pitch timer are going to be like, what's going on? Well, it's a TV timeout, So there's going to be a length of time to the games. You're never going to get it cut down to an hour and a half game. But the pace of the game is going to flow a lot smoother, a lot quicker, with a number of the different changes that they put in the last few years. The relief pitcher must pitch to 3 batters rule. So the manager isn't constantly coming out, changing pitcher. If they're like a number of every batter or 2 in the late innings, the pitch timer, the limit on pickoffs, all these things are going to pick up the pace of the game. So that's what you're going to see as a big difference, I think, in watching a baseball game, is the crispness of the game. And I'm looking forward to it, frankly.
All right.
Another thing, Rich, you mentioned Machado being called as the first guy and being traditionally one of these guys that might take a little longer to set up than other hitters. And Bilotti being a slow mover on the opposite end as a pitcher and taking the pitch timer down to 0. I think what you're going to see some of these guys do, the guys who are on the extreme, like those 2 are, you're going to see some of these guys try it now, because the games don't count. You're going to see them, how much can I get away with? How far can I go? So a Machado might get in there and say, let me do what I do and see what I do and see what happens. And then he's like, all right, now I got to cut something out. You know what I mean? Bilotti is going to keep taking it down to 0. And it's really on the umpires, Rich, when you said, like, I don't know why, that wasn't called a ball, because the pitch climber had run out. It's not when he throws, when the ball leaves his hand, by the way. It's where he is when he makes his first natural movement to pitch. So not from the set position or from the stretch, but when he actually starts into his windup. As long as he started into his windup, then he's good. So you might see a guy start into his windup and throw the pitch, and the pitch timer's still going. It goes to 0, but he's not illegal, if you follow what I'm saying.
He's already in his windup. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of it's going to do, it's all going to be called by the umpires. So you may get, some umps who are religious. We've seen that for the history of the game, Rich. Some guys who are religious about the strike zone, and other guys who are liberal, right? We've seen guys who are like, okay, they're a little pitcher friendly, quote. Mm-hmm. Another guy who's like hitter friendly. He gives a wide strike zone or a narrow strike zone. So I think you're going to see that here. You'll see some guys who are like, all right, that was close, but I ain't going to quibble. If things start getting exaggerated, then you'll see those guys make a call. You'll see other guys who are, and probably most of them, especially initially because MLB wants to, not the MLB, Rich, but MLB. There's no such thing as the Major League Baseball. But you're going to see MLB wants these rules called. So you're going to see a lot of these umpires, especially the new guys. There's a lot of new umps this year. A bunch of guys retired. I don't know if they just didn't feel like, been around for decades and they didn't feel like dealing with the changes. But there are a number of new umpires. They've been umpiring in the minor leagues for years, and they're used to these rules already. So I think that most of the umpires, I think, are going to call it pretty straight. You'll have a few, and those few who are a little more liberal, maybe let a hitter get away with a second or two, extra preparation, a pitcher get away with a second or two, overage on their delivery of the pitch. That's where you're going to see some fans go, what happened there? Well, you're supposed to call that. And so for the most part, I think you're going to see it called pretty tightly, though.
Yeah, we'll have to see interpretation on the umpires. That'll be playing into the games. Rob Thompson's got his first full season as the Phillies manager without that interim tag. He picked up a couple good players in the offseason, so I think it's going to make it a little bit easier for him this year.
Yeah, of course. Well, you got just picking up Trey Turner, right there. That's a big addition. Late in the offseason, they signed Josh Harrison, who is a really nice, experienced, productive, two-time All-Star, veteran infielder who can help out. They've got some more depth in their outfield. First, he's going to have a first full season with Brandon Marsh manning center field. Marsh is a key player. How well does he handle playing more against left-handed pitching? And then even the depth guys that are out there now have a little more experience. A guy like Jake Cave or Dalton Guthrie is a talented player that they'll have out there. They'll have Edmundo Sosa for a full season. So he's got a more talented roster. I already mentioned Taijuan Walker on the pitching staff. The young guys, Andrew Painter's going to break in, given health at some point this season. You may even see Mick Abel and Griff McGarry at some point as the year moves along. In the bullpen, you saw them make some really good additions by bringing in lefty Matt Stram, lefty Gregory Soto, and of course the veteran right-hander Craig Kimbrell. So the bullpen it looks like it's been bolstered. The Phillies are going to be a really good team this year, again, given health. And we know health is already an issue because they're missing their MVP and Bryce Harper for half the year almost. So as long as they don't have any further, big physical issues with their key players, they're going to be right in the thick of things.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see if Rob Thompson is actually, the motivator behind the Phillies. I think he is. When he took over, it seemed like that team totally changed, and maybe they became looser. The management style was different. He's sort of easygoing type of guy, it seems like, for the most part, as long as the job gets done. And that can motivate players to do well as well. So I'm looking forward to see how Thompson will handle this season, his first on the reins of the Phillies, the 56th manager ever of the Philadelphia Phillies. And to wrap this podcast up, Matt, I want to bring up an old Philly and a great broadcaster that passed away 10 days ago now. Tim McCarver passed away recently. A lot of younger fans may not know him too well, but I know you and I do. He was an essential part of the Phillies way back when Steve Carlton was pitching. He was Steve Carlton's personal catcher And what a great broadcaster. What a loss it was.
Yeah, and younger players, younger fans, and especially when I say younger fans, I even mean fans in their 30s. They only know McCarver as a broadcaster, and he was a fantastic broadcaster, commentator. In fact, he was enshrined in the Baseball Hall of Fame as the Ford Frick Award winner as a Hall of Fame broadcaster. But he was a fantastic ball player too. This is a 4-decade ball player, Rich. He broke in with the St. Louis Cardinals just a month, I believe, out of high school in 1959, or a few months out of high school back in 1959. He then went and it became slowly became over the early 60s a regular. And by the mid 60s, he had become the Cardinals starting catcher. He started for 3 NL pennant winners in St. Louis, including World Series champions in 1964 and 67. Steve Carlton debuted with the Cardinals in 65 as a 20-year-old, and he and McCarver began their relationship then. They became fast friends and lifelong friends. It was in October of 69, Rich, that McCarver became part of what was one of the most historic trades, it would turn out, in MLB history. And in that deal, the Cardinals sent McCarver, Curt Flood, who was a 2-time All-Star, 7-time Gold Glove Award winner, or 3-time All-Star, and a guy, outfielder named Byron Brown, and a pitcher named Joe Horner, who some older Phillies fans will remember those two. The Cardinals sent that package to the Phillies for a 3-player package that included Cookie Rojas, who was a key second baseman with the Phillies during the 60s, a young pitcher named Jerry Johnson, and the linchpin of that deal, Dick Allen, who was very controversial here in Philly, 3-time All-Star, 64 NL Rookie of the Year. What ended up happening, of course, was the key player coming back to the Phillies in that deal wasn't necessarily McCarver, but it was Curt Flood, the outfielder, again, 7-time Gold Glover at that point, 3-time All-Star. He was a fantastic center fielder. Curt Flood just did not want to come to the Phillies. They were a losing team. They were looking like they were going to be on the downturn. They were giving up their biggest star in Dick Allen in that trade. So Flood saw coming to the Phillies as a losing proposition. He refused to report, and he challenged Major League Baseball's reserve system. He didn't end up winning that fight, but what he did do was he opened that entire legal process by which ultimately during the early to mid 70s, Major League Baseball's reserve clause was defeated finally in court, was overcome, and the free agent era opened up. So Curt Flood, a historic player, was involved in that Tim McCarver trade that brought McCarver to the Phillies ultimately. The Phillies got a good player, Willie Montanez, as compensation for Curt Flood.
I remember Willie.
Yeah, well, there was a freak game, Rich, that Tim McCarver played in during his first big season with the Phillies in May of 70. He was the starting catcher, and he broke a finger in a game in San Francisco. And their backup catcher was a guy named Mike Ryan, who a lot of Phillies fans will remember as one of the longest tenured coaches in this history of the club. Mm-hmm. Mike Ryan was the backup catcher. 2 batters after McCarver breaks his finger, Mike Ryan suffers a broken finger on a play at the plate. So the Phillies lose both of their catchers in the same game. Ryan ended up coming back before McCarver, and then McCarver himself returned in September. And Timmy was the Phillies starting catcher all through 71 and 72 as we opened Veterans Stadium. And as the Phillies acquired Carlton in a big, well-known 1972 trade with the Cardinals for another righty ace, Rick Wise. So that reunites McCarver with Carlton. And you think, oh, it's a nice story. But what happens, that only lasts a few months, because in mid-June of that 72 season, McCarver gets dealt away to the Montreal Expos. So St. Louis ends up reacquiring him. And then finally, he ends up returning to the Phillies. He got released. He had bounced around. He went to Boston. He ends up coming back to the Phillies in I believe, 1974 or 75. And it was right when they got McCarver back that they went on that streak of finally contending again, winning the 3 straight NL East crowns. Now, excuse me, McCarver ends up kind of aging out of the game and as he's aging into his late 30s, he takes up broadcasting for the first time. And he joins Harry Kalas and Richie Ashburn, Andy Musser, Chris Wheeler, that group in the Phillies broadcast booth as an analyst on radio and TV, 78, 79, a little bit. And he joins what was then fledgling HBO, the cable network. Back then, in the 70s, it was just starting out. And they had a baseball program called Race for the Pennant. It was kind of like a highlights, discussion show, talk show. And McCarver was one of the hosts of that. So he gets released by the Phillies in November of 79. That's the end of his playing career. Well, then what happens? He's starting his broadcasting career. Well, now in 80, of course, we all know the Phillies ended up contending. They get back into the hunt, and they're battling for the division again in September 1980. Well, on September 1st of 1980, what do? They signed Tim McCarver as a player to return. He's been out of the game all year. What they're looking for is for him to basically serve as a coach in the clubhouse, veteran voice, maybe a lefty pinch hit bat here and there. They break him in slowly, as a player, working out and all. Maybe he's going to be some emergency insurance, as a veteran voice in the class, back up at first base and catcher. And he does get into a half dozen games. And those half dozen games in September of 1980 make him that 4-decade player, having played in 1959 and 1980, and then, of course, the entirety of the 60s and 70s. So very rare performance as a player, appearing in 4 decades. The day after the Phillies won the division, Rich, and very dramatic game. Everybody remembers extra innings at Montreal. Schmidt hits a home run, and they ended up winning the division. Well, they still have to play the next day. And they've been partying, the players have been partying all night in the clubhouse, drinking. They're not ready to play a game on Sunday afternoon. Well, what does Dallas Green do? He runs out a lineup that's pretty much all backups, and gives his regulars the rest. The only regular that played that day was Pete Rose, who, he wanted to play every day, so they let him play. But McCarver gets an opportunity to play in his final game. And in that final game, he gets his final big league hit. It was actually a 2-out, 2-run double that put the Phillies up at the time. And he's not included on the playoff roster. What he did was he joined the Kalas and Ashburn as a voice on the Phillies TV broadcasts in the NLCS, and then on the radio, for the World Series, because back in those days, the home broadcasters weren't allowed to do World Series games. They had to be on a national TV and radio. But then he, just begins his broadcast career. He worked for all 3 major networks at one time. He did a pair of Olympic Games broadcasts. He was an analyst at different times for both the Mets, Cardinals, and the Phillies. So he finally retired after the 2013 season. He did do some Cardinals broadcasts right through 2019. He would do a number of Cardinals games each year. Sat out 2020 because of the COVID pandemic. Did a few games in 2021, and then last April he announced that he was fully retired from broadcasting. And as he said, finally passed away this year. But 3-time Emmy Award winner, Ford C. Fricker winner, enshrined in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Baseball career as a player, coach, broadcaster from the 50s through the 2021. So fantastic, career for Tim McCarver. God bless him. Rest his soul.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And he reminded me of Yogi Berra in a way, that Yogi Berra seemed to be always in baseball when I was younger. There was never a time I never heard of Yogi Berra, and he was well before my time of watching baseball. He was that guy that stretched those 4 decades, like you said. And what a great broadcaster. ex-Philly, great stories with Carlton, his personal catcher. Tremendous loss there. And I know, life is short, life is fast, but Tim McCarver died at 81 years old. Rest his soul. And we were happy to have him for that long.
Yep. God bless his family. I know he had a couple of kids, obviously grown kids and grandkids. So, I'm sure they all miss him. And great memories with Tim McCarver.
Yes. Well, that about brings our show to a close here for Phillies Talk Podcast. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you on the internet, Matt?
First, we'll give an update here. The Phillies are up 2-0 on the Minnesota Twins in the bottom of the third down there in Clearwater. So there's your little game update. Fans can reach me the usual place, Rich, which is at Phillies Bell. So it's like the bell that rings out there when they win a game or they hit a home run. At Phillies Bell on Twitter. You can also go to at Phillies Bell on let me see. Do Instagram. I have it anywhere else? Oh no, I'm not. You know what? I pulled it down, Rich. I'm just on Twitter. So one-stop shopping. Visit at Phillies Bell on Twitter. Have daily history updates on the team, some in-game broadcasting or commentary, and a lot of feature articles, retweets, comments on all kinds of stuff. So a lot of good Phillies information at Phillies Bell on Twitter.
Yes, indeed. Check it out. It's a worthwhile follow. Of course, you can find my website at fightinphillies.com. Follow me on Twitter at fightinphillies. And of course, our Phillies Talk podcast here that we do and the live stream. You can join our Facebook page and check out the live streams when we do them. Subscribe there and you'll get notified when we're live and doing these live stream broadcasts. And also the YouTube channel. Check it out. And our podcast. So if you want to just subscribe to the audio podcast, that's fine as well. We need a lot of listeners. Check it out over at fightinphillies.com or on Twitter from Matt's feed or my feed. And baseball is back. I just wanted to read a quick Twitter quote here from someone, a Phillies fan. She says, "My soul is so much happier now that the at Phillies are back," with a couple baseball emojis there. And I think that about sums it up for most of us out there. We feel a lot better when the Phillies are playing.
Feel a lot better. It's baseball season. Play ball, Rich.
Yep. And we're going to do some interviews with some other bloggers this year. Can't wait to get them on, talking with myself and Matt. So stick with the podcast, hit subscribe and share us with your friends. And we'll talk to you on the next edition of the Phillies Talk Podcast. Everyone have a great day.
Go Phils.